Dear class, welcome to American National Government. Today we actually talk about what is government, okay? Let's take a look. So government is essentially the people, the agencies, the institutions that run the state. Think about who the president is, the Congress, right? All of them, they form the government. So there's people involved, there's agencies or branches, there's institutions, all of it together. What's a state, by the way? A state is an independent territory that can govern itself and the population inside. So essentially, it's like a country, right? It's independent territory. It can govern itself and the population inside. No other country has control over it, and it's recognized by other states, meaning that everyone says, oh, you're an independent country. Let's, take the example of the US. The US together is considered one state in international relations. So the government runs the state, meaning somebody has to have political power in that state and to govern it, right? What can we say about governments? So the textbook American Government talks about, in chapter 1, government affects all aspects of people's lives. What we eat, where we go to school, what kind of education we receive, how our tax money is spent, and what we do in our free time, all are affected by government. Meaning that it is this thing that affects everything we do. We think we are free people, right? Walking around, no worries in our lives, but actually our entire life, there's some aspect of government in it, right? So the government runs the state. It affects our lives. It has many branches and agencies and has a vision for how society should be and engages in planning economic, social, political, scientific, etc., to bring about that vision of society. And therefore, it makes laws, collects taxes, prints money, issues and pays off debt, and provides services to the public. Let's look at types of government. Rather, we are looking at, this should be types of government. We have absolute monarchy, we have constitutional monarchy. And we'll look at these. What do these mean? We have democracy, we have republic, we have military rule, we have dictatorship. So some of these types, let's look at. Democracy, republic. So democracy is government, we say, of the people, by the people, for the people, right? So there's an element of power that people have to form the government. So anyone can be part of the process. Very empowering, isn't it? Look at republic. So a republic can be a democracy. Usually there's some element of separation of powers, some element of checks and balances. Let's look at some details. Okay, so constitution, we threw the word constitution and said constitutional monarchy. How does that go together? So let's look at what constitutionalism means. It means the rule of law follows the Constitution breach of the Constitution is considered illegal. So essentially, the state, every state has a constitution, and that establishes the kind of laws they have in that country. And if you breach the Constitution, it is illegal. If you have a democracy, the content of the Constitution may contain a Bill of Rights, and we'll talk about what the Bill of Rights means. But essentially, in a democracy, we have some idea that the government must be by the people, of the people, and for the people. And so there's an element of empowering of people, so they have certain rights, and therefore some kind of Bill of Rights type of document or section would be there. Laws proposed by the legislative body, meaning the body that makes laws, can be contested by the Supreme Court if they are unconstitutional. So when you have a constitution, the Supreme Court's entire objective becomes to make sure that the lawmakers don't breach the Constitution, that they follow the Constitution. So constitutionalism is sort of holding the Constitution as a document and putting it above all other documents and saying, this is the law of the land. It's the ultimate law. Zeal. So in many democracies, you'll notice that people show unusual faith in the Constitution, like it's some kind of religious document. So whenever sometimes you hear that something is happening and people immediately say, oh, that's unconstitutional, they should not have done that, right? So there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of protection around this Constitution. So people become very passionate about the Constitution. So this type of phenomena usually happens when other kinds of binding elements are not there. For example, there might not be a common language or culture. People might come from many different parts of the world. They might have different religions. So the Constitution becomes the most important sort of social uh, set of values for the people. And it becomes the source of unity. Some states don't have constitutions. They want to have constitutions, but some things get in the way and it takes time to form a constitution. For example, a country like Pakistan did not have a constitution until the 1970s. And why did it take so long? Because, Pakistan was formed in 1947 after India and Pakistan broke. It took a long time because there was military rule in Pakistan starting in the 1950s, the late 50s. And so they delayed forming a parliamentary system and a constitution. Monarchy. What does monarchy mean? I mean, you all know that monarchy means rule by kings and queens, right? They can have a constitution. Even kings like law and order, right? So even in medieval Europe, there may have been an era where they had a constitution. And as you know, with the Magna Carta, the people are demanding a constitution, right? The lords are demanding some kind of legal structure where their rights are protected against versus the king, right? So there's a desire from the lords to have a constitution, and maybe the constitution also protects the monarch and says, okay, we're having power sharing. This protects the kings and the lords. There's going to be some law of the land, right? You also have constitution because you want people to follow a system to keep the order so that you can have regular life. So monarchs might also have advisors, such as a prime minister, with some kind of decision-making power. And why would they do that, right? They want other people to do all the work, right? They want to sit on the throne and have people work for them. So some level of power sharing with other landed classes who have soldiers, and you saw that in the Magna Carta, right? Absolute monarchy is when the king or queen is slowly consolidating power from other people, such as the lords, right? They're doing things to oppress the lords and the other people. They might suspend the constitution. They might have a constitution, but they try to hoard the power. They might even give people some rights and liberties. However, these can be suspended from time to time because the monarch desires more power and wants the people to sort of follow whatever they decree. An example. So Louis XIV of France is from the 1700s or late 1600s, and he was famous for saying that, he was the state, and he made a statement, I am the state, meaning that he has all the power. So he's been reducing the power of other people. He's consolidating his power. Military rule. We don't see this in the US. We don't see martial law or military rule where the military unit suspends the constitution and takes over the government. But this has happened around the world. They form and head the executive branch of government, the legislative, the judicial, and the government bureaucracy. So everywhere you see that they've taken over, you might still see a civilian bureaucracy that does a lot of paperwork, right? That does a lot of the processes. For example, at the local level, you might see people are still, processing your DMV stuff, like your Department of Motor Vehicles might still be around, right? But at the top level, military will be in control. And again, there might be a constitution that's been rewritten because the military is in power. Also, the military might rule with a Bill of Rights, but the rights might be very limited. So an example of where they have martial law right now is Myanmar. Modern democracies and republics. So why are we talking about these things? We're talking about it because we are looking at what government means in various ways, right? And the US claims to be a democracy and has many institutions in place. So modern democracies are constitutional. They have rule of law. They have certain documents which lay out the separation of powers between the different branches of government. They lay out the rights and liberties of citizens and populations. There's some kind of process in which the citizens elect their government. So they have certain elections. Maybe these are regular processes. Democracies and republics might be parliamentary system, or they might be presidential system. As I mentioned, separation of powers. Why? Because they don't want too much power in one body of government or in one person, right? They don't want to have a monarchy situation again where you have a king or a queen. You also want division of labor and powers within government, right? So division of labor is a way in which you're dividing up the work So you have many things to do in a government. You can't do everything. One person cannot do everything, nor one branch of government. And so they divide it. Checks and balances has to do with accountability to the people and also limiting power. Elections are key. So citizens of certain age can run for public office. Elections occur at regular intervals. Public officials must be elected by the people. Rules are observed in the election process. Results are considered valid and enforced, or there's a process to challenge them in courts, right? So these are all types of behavior in a democracy. Who are elected? Who are elected officials? It depends on the system, right? It depends on the country. In the US, we have presidents, legislative members, such as in Congress or at the state legislature. You have federal judges, you have state judges, governors of states. These are all elected officials. You also have at the local level, mayors, city council officials, school board officials, district attorneys. In many states, district attorneys are elected officials. What other officials might there be? Parliamentary. We don't have a parliamentary system in the US, but during the time of the formation of the American colonies by the British or the English at the time, they did have a budding parliamentary system. It was new, but they had something. And eventually, the UK became a parliamentary system. They still have a king or queen, but those people don't have much power to rule. They're sort of ceremonial. They are considered the ceremonial heads of state, but the head of government is the prime minister. So the members of parliament are elected. Then a party must win a certain percentage to be called the majority. The majority party forms the government and they select a person from their team to be prime minister. If a party does not have the majority to form government, it can form a coalition with other parties to do so, and then the coalition selects the prime minister. So that's how the parliamentary system functions, right? Separation of powers, checks and balances. Accountability. So why have separation of powers? Why have checks and balances? The goal is accountability and not limitless power like kings of before. We kind of talked about this. But accountability is a big feature of democracies. As we said, it's government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So for the people is the big one, right? We always look at elections and we think, oh, that must be a democratic country. Only if the government is working in the interest of the people. What if we elect a government, but it doesn't do anything for us, right? So accountability is a very high measure of democracy. Questions we will keep asking. Do we actually have checks and balances in government? Do we actually have separations of powers? Let's look at those things over time.